everybody, welcome back to my channel Ad Maiore. So last time we talked about romanticism in general. We described the main aspects, the key concepts, main themes of romanticism in England, and not only. We talked about the social, the political, the economical context. Today we're going to study and to start to study one of the most representative poets of the time. I'm talking about William Wordsworth. William Wordsworth, together with Blake, together with Coleridge, was one of the poets of the first generation of romantic poets, obviously. And he was extremely representative for many of the aspects we have seen last time, and we'll see together again about nature, for example, about the attitude of the poet, about the poet-prophet. Most of the times we read, we study, we quote Wordsworth, but we don't really talk about why, the reason why he decided to choose such a simplicity in language, in themes, in topics. I'm going to explain you. So first of all, William Wordsworth was born in 1770. That was quite an important year actually, because it's considered to be the year when the Sturm und Drang was born, developed in Germany. So it was quite a coincidence, actually. He was born in a town called Cockermouth. It was in the age, it was near Lake District. Lake District is an important place, an important area, an important element for Wordsworth, very recurring in his poems, in his life. He's got a true affection towards this place he grew up in, and he really finds inspiration, and he really considers it a source of feelings and inspiration. He also traveled a lot, also abroad, especially to France, where he met, and he had also some sympathies for revolutionary movements. But then he came back and he experienced another kind of poetry, another kind of art, which was very intimate, which was connected with nature. In 1797, he started one of the most important friendships in his life, the friendship with Samuel Taylor Coleridge, another poet of the first generation. They were friends, and they had many different moments of friendships, and then they had also important contrasts in their lives. But they wrote together, and this is something very important for us to remember. They wrote together one of the most important collections of ballads, of poems of the Romantic period. I'm talking about the Lyrical Ballads. The Lyrical Ballads were written together by William Wordsworth and Samuel Taylor Coleridge. At first, the authors were unknown, were unmentioned, and then it was republished again and again, and it became very, very popular. In this collection of poems, we can really find out the two completely different personalities of Coleridge and Wordsworth. Coleridge on one side he had a very tormented personality, and he is the incarnation, he's the embodiment of the sublime, okay? So his idea of nature is of a very dangerous and fearful and gloomy element that conveys a message that concerns the dramatic human destiny. We can find all of it in the Rime of the Ancient Mariner, for example. On the other side, Wordsworth is the complete opposite. He is the incarnation of the beautiful, as far as the concept of beautiful and sublime that we have considered in our last video. So you remember Burke intended sublime and beautiful into opposite ways, okay? Beautiful was a representation of a very reassuring beauty, of a very balanced, tamed, quiet beauty. Okay, on the other side, the sublime, as I said before about Coleridge, was something extremely dangerous, even fatal, sometimes very frightful, but anyway extremely fascinating and attractive for the human being. So if Coleridge was a representation of the sublime, Wordsworth was the representation of the beautiful aspect. Okay, in fact, his nature is also a representation of quiet. It is a source of inspiration, but also a source of peace. Okay, somehow we can say that he considered nature on three different levels. At first, it was something that was opposed to town. Okay, we know that Romantic poets in general had a very negative idea of a very negative perspective and opinion of Industrial Revolution in general, and so also urbanization that polluted towns and nature and corrupted also the human being. So obviously the idea of nature as the countryside opposed to the town, to the city, to industry had sort of an idyllic meaning. Okay. Then second level, he considers also nature, as I said before, as a source of feelings. Okay, a real source of feelings, of inspiration. And third level, he also considered nature as a pantheistic, organic, living whole. Okay, so this whole, this organ, okay, was living, was somehow permeated of God, of spirituality. It was the expression somehow of God. Inside nature, he thought that we can find, especially the poet can find hidden truths about spirituality, about life, because nature is actually living. It is an active force, a positive force actually. In fact, in one of his most famous works, his most famous poems, written in 1804, and it was called, most of the times it was called the Daffodils, okay? But now we tend to remember this poem with another title, which is the first line of the poem, I wandered lonely as a cloud, okay? And remember, when we say lonely from a romantic perspective, it doesn't have a negative meaning. On the contrary, loneliness could be an opportunity to explore nature, to explore themselves, and so it has a positive meaning after all. Anyway, in I Wander Lonely as a Cloud, Wordsworth talks about these flowers, the daffodils, near Lake District. So we're back to Lake District again. And these flowers are very simple, are very humble, okay? It's not some exotic flower, it's something very common. And still it has got such an important meaning. So something so humble could really be a source of feeling, a source of an inspiration for the poet. And these humble flowers, okay, were humanized. They are described as a crowd, okay, who is dancing and tossing their heads and moving their heads. He said tossing their heads, okay, in this dance The dance was moved, was provoked by the breeze, okay, the same breeze that moved also the waves in the lake. So there is this humanization of these flowers. So even something so humble, so little, could be as important as a human being. And even a human being can be as humble as a little flower like this. Okay? It is also very interesting how he compares and he mirrors different levels. So we have on one side, one level is the sky. It's night, so there are stars. And the mirror on the ground of these stars are the daffodils, okay, which are glowing or golden anyway as the stars. And on the earth we have also two different levels. Waves, okay, on the lake, water obviously, and waves of flowers dancing in the breeze. So it's a sort of a continuum, we would say it in Latin, okay? Everything belongs together. We have a unicum, okay? This is also an expression of that organic living all, after all. Another important aspect is about colors. Colors. In fact, he used colors to give us some emotions, to provoke some unconscious emotions. When he talks about the daffodils, he says, he writes that they are golden. He doesn't say they're yellow, okay? He says they're golden. Golden because they're precious, okay? So the value of this humble flower is also contained, is also expressed by the color. Also talking about the sky, for example, it's night, so we know that night is one of the recurring themes in Romanticism. You could say that the sky is dark, is black, okay, but it doesn't. He talks about a Milky Way. Milky Way is a representation of something bright, of something full of light, milky. The milk is white. So even talking about the night, he gives us gives us the impression, we can say the illusion of something absolutely full of light and positivity, using colors, using the chromatic illusions, okay? Then another important aspect is that he actually, when he talks about these daffodils and the lake and everything, he isn't there. He's at home on his couch in a pensive mood, he says, okay? Pensive mood is again something positive, okay? Because he could really think about his feelings. He could receive suggestions, okay, from nature. This is also very romantic. And while he is sitting his line on the couch, he remembers. He remembers the daffodils, the landscape, and everything. So memory is another very important element for romantic poets in general, for Wordsworth in this case, memory. Memory. How can a poet get back to something, watch something using memory? He does it through his inward eye. His inward eye is imagination. This eye, okay, this eye that is interior, okay? And why doesn't he use the word interior? He says inward. Inward means that this eye, this eye of imagination, is inside the poet, and at the same time it is also pointed, okay, towards the poet himself. This is also very, very important and very, very interesting. So the poet is able to, has this special talent, this special gift to have this inward eye, to use memory as he does, to use imagination as he does, okay? And this is why he is called a poet-prophet, because he can understand more, he can get deeper into the truths of life, of nature, and then he can convey this reality through art, okay, and make it understandable for everyone. Okay, so when talking about this landscape, about his memories of this landscape, Wordsworth says that the poet cannot but be gay. These are his words. So he cannot but be gay. He must be gay. He must be happy. Okay? So nature is and has to be a source of joy. This is completely opposite. When we talked about Coleridge, okay, he conveyed the exact opposite message. Okay? But for Wordsworth, nature has to be a source of happiness, a source of joy, of positive feelings, feelings of peace. After all, I have talked before of a sort of an idyllic emotion. Also, for example, in another work by Wordsworth, The Solitary Reaper, in this case we are talking about a woman, a young woman, so a human being, okay, not a flower or something else belonging to nature. But she's got the same qualities as the daffodils. She's humble, she's there in rural life, in rural environment, okay, and she is so simple, again, and this is one of the many examples of this choice of Wordsworth to always use, or better be inspired, okay, by very simple elements. Another simple element is childhood, for example. The child is a very recurring theme, a very cyclic theme in Romanticism. We talked about this while talking about Blake. Okay, Blake in The Chimney Sweeper, for example, talks about a child who is corrupted, who is polluted on a metaphorical level by industrial revolution, by this new pattern of society, and this society is corrupting his innocence. And again, in Blake, in The Songs of Innocence, and especially in The Lamb, he talks about this lamb, which is the symbol of Christ, but it is also the symbol of the child, of childhood, who is the period of innocence. Okay. Also in Wordsworth we have this recurring, this cyclic theme of childhood. All these elements, okay, all these perception he had were very well resumed in his preface, the preface to the Lyrical Ballads. In his preface, he explains very well, in a very striking and clear way, why he made these choices. Okay, so first of all, he says, and he repeats again, that the artist has to be free. Okay, has to be independent. We talked about this in my previous video, talking about Romanticism in general. We said that one of the key concepts of Romanticism was the independence of the artist, independence from social, political, moral rules, also independence from artistic elements, artistic rules, from neoclassicism, for example. Okay, we also mentioned, for example, a concept of artist who has to be completely independent, who is the Genie in Germany during the Sturm und Drang. So in this period, okay, the Genie, so-called genius, we could say in English, but actually we tend to use this word, this concept, Genie, okay, is absolutely self-aware, independent, and it has got the power to create. Okay, he's got the power to create art. Okay, as well as God has the power to create nature. And since art isn't an imitation of nature, it's a different thing with the same dignity as nature. At the same time, the Genie, okay, has got the same dignity as God, as a creator. This is a very powerful idea, okay? It's typical of the Sturm und Drang. Wordsworth believes in the independence of poets, of intellectuals in general, okay? And the importance of their creation because their creation is the expression of the poet-prophet, okay? So he adopts a language that he defines the language really used by man. Okay, so a realistic language. Not only because he wants to be understood, which is actually true, but also because of the topics he's talking about. He talks about common life, okay, mostly. He talks about low, rustic life somehow, and he believes that in this context the heart can reach its highest level of maturity. He believes that the essential passions are developed in rural life, and he also believes that in the great simplicity, okay, elementary feelings can germinate. These are his words again. This is also a quotation. Germinate. They can flourish. Elementary feelings. Elementary feelings, it doesn't mean they are low. It means they're essential. Okay. Rural life, simple language, common elements, all of these things, all of these aspects are less under the influence of social vanity. This is what he says. This is why he chooses them, okay? Because society corrupts, society can create vanity, and we remember that the word vain also means empty, okay, in a literary acception of the term. So again, his language, as I said before, is very simple, is very plain, and he says something very interesting, that this simple language, really used by man, is actually more philosophical. He says it's more philosophical than an elaborated language. Why is it more philosophical? Because in this way, through this language and talking about common and humble themes, we can say that feelings and concepts are conveyed in a very immediate way, okay, in a very direct way, and so they are more real, they are more genuine, okay. So, the poet has to be independent. The poet is defined as a man talking to man. Okay, this is what he says. A man talking to man is a man that conveys, that talks, that gives a message to other men. And this poet has to be some characteristics. He describes those characteristics. First of all, the poet has to have sensibility, okay, so perception. Then this poet has to have enthusiasm. Okay, this is very important. The joy we talked about before. Okay, then he has tenderness. Okay, he has to be tender. This is also a very interesting, very sweet aspect. And he has to represent, to have a very comprehensive soul. Okay, a very comprehensive soul, because he has to include so many aspects and so many perceptions. He's a poet-prophet. He's got his inward eye to see deeper into things, to collect those impressions and then to give them back through art, using art. Okay, this is what Wordsworth did and what he wrote of himself, of his poetry, in the Preface to the Lyrical Ballads. Obviously, in the Lyrical Ballads we have also poems by Coleridge, who had a completely opposite perspective, who had a completely opposite opinion. So next time we'll talk about Coleridge, and then we put them together. They're like two sides of the same coin, and we can understand the lyrical ballads as a whole. Okay, thank you very much for listening. Please subscribe my channel, and I hope to see you very soon with Coleridge.